Okay, so I just got home from a little trip, and I was in Atlanta at a meetings and conference, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama was there. And they had many, many different events. But the one thing I would like to share that I found the most inspirational was this one day where in the morning and the afternoon they held what was kind of like one of those mind life conferences, and it was about research that had been done on compassion meditation. And so they have for many years had these mind life conferences, and His Holiness has kind of given people ideas, and people have taken those ideas, and really this was like the fruition day for a lot of this, and in a way it's also a beginning. So what they've done is they've taken many of the teachings from our Tibetan Buddhist tradition, especially the teachings on equanimity and how to develop love and compassion, somewhat like the 7-point or the 7-point cause and effect, but they've made it into a secular kind of meditation program. So they have like a 6 to 8 week program that they've put together, and this is mostly done by a geshe at Emory University, who's a adjunct professor or something there, and has gotten his PhD. So he's very well qualified, both in the Tibetan studies and in the Western ways. And so they've developed a program. One unique thing about the way they did this was they started first with teaching people, a lot like what we do, how to just calm their minds, make their minds receptive. Then they taught a whole section on what they called self-compassion, which was very, I think, very something that they added to it that was very necessary and needed, and I could see all the elements that they had in that are ways where I've had difficulty in my own practice that they pretty much addressed. And I think the biggest point of that was, that section of their program was that it made people see how their experiences are really the result of their own deeds. They were able to help people learn that, and it also made you realize that you can change that, and then it brought you to a point of making a determination to do that. And this was their little section on self-compassion. And then they went through what are the usual meditations that we are aware of, starting with equanimity and then going through meditations that lead to love and compassion. And I think they left it at compassion probably. They just gave a broad sweep about what they were doing. And then that research was used in different ways, and people were studied in all different ways. And this was then presentations about that. And it was both the researchers at the University of Wisconsin with all their brain mapping studies, and then there were the physiologists, which I loved, of course, with all their stuff about the vagus nerve and all these chemicals and cortisol and all the things that are happening in your body. And then there was a really wonderful presentation of a man who studies non-humans and compassion and empathy, and they have like 1,000 chimps, you know, and he had a lot of footage and a lot of research on that. It was quite beautiful, and I took a lot of notes, so I'll share this with you. I thought about you a lot. And then the afternoon was the more practical application studies, where they actually had taken first this program to the college freshmen and shown decreased anxiety and depression with college freshmen who did this 6 to 8 week training, and then they had a very inspiring presentation about using it with foster care kids, which was just so fantastic to hear. And they had just like that experiment I saw in my college days where they had the black box. They set it in somebody's house and they recorded things and got like kind of life information. They had a digital version, this thing called the ear, that they put on these kids with before and after kind of things. And although the children, they were 13 to 16-year-olds, they did, and it was a fairly small group. These are small studies, and a lot more needs to be done, but they're like preliminary steps in a great direction. These kids with a 6 to 8 week training, they didn't really have much self-report of change, which is kind of similar to our practice. Sometimes I've gone a few years not being able to see the changes that are happening when people around me are noticing it. But then they also had other ways to get information from them, including this little recording device that would record for 10 minutes of every hour. And then they would analyze that information of their speech, what they were involved in, da 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 da. And they were seeing that although the kids didn't report much more, you know, they didn't have the recognition that they were changing, they were actually able to show that these kids were with other people more. You know, they were more involved with others. Their speech was more about positive things, about more meaningful things, more talking about their feelings or emotions. There were a lot of different aspects about it that showed definite trends towards improvement. And then they had one about children who were 5 to 8. They did this with a classroom. And this was just so amazing because they were taking concepts like, you know, our breathing meditation and interdependence and all these concepts, and they were able to, they went into the school system for months and just studied the kids and decided, well, how are we going to teach this? And then they came up with skits, plays, guided meditations, games, quite involving things, and they had really great stories about how the kids really captured the concepts. They felt like they were able to transmit all of these concepts that they wanted to present in a way that the kids really got, and it showed from their comments that they were able to access this information. And they had some great stories about, like, one of the people went in and he had this sweater that his dad had given him, and he was talking to the kids like, where did this sweater come from? And, oh, the sheep, the this, the that. And then they go through, like we do, you know, with the kindness of others, or some of these meditations, all the people that are involved. You know, now you got the farm, and you got the sun, and you got the grass, and you got, pretty soon it's like, oh, the whole world is involved, you know. And then the kids said, and we're part of that, you know, like, and we're also involved, you know. And then, so, you know, they were able to get these concepts. And they were also, there was one point where they were trying to teach about how, you know, how it's easier to work with an affliction early on rather than late. So they used this analogy of a forest fire, how, okay, what's easier, when it's a little spark or when you have a whole fire raging? When is it easier, you know? And one little kid, a little boy, after the whole thing was done, went up to him and said, oh, I have a lot of forest fires in my life. You know, so they were really internalizing and understanding these things. So this was a very non-sectarian approach to compassion meditation, and showing some very good initial data, and very inspiring to think about the possibilities of this kind of research and use of, you know, what things that we have learned in our own practice that can be very helpful for the mind, much more peaceful, and just so many benefits. So that was a great thing. That was a fruition of sorts.